Hello guys, I wanted to do some analysis on the Worlds series so far. This is for day one. I'm Znayu and I think I could do some analysis that some people might find interesting. So I'm going to go series by series and just talk about what I think happened, anything of note. And afterwards, what I want to do is give my top four for the teams that I think passed my eye test. Not necessarily the teams that are number one or number two or three or four in the standings, but the teams that I just like how they play. So let's get into it. So series one is going to be Ground Zero versus Envy. I think that honestly, Envy disappointed. We expected them to play really well, and Ground Zero isn't even that high in contention for winning this whole thing, while Envy is. I don't know. There's nothing really more interesting besides that. Maybe the fact that Envy is just not going to be doing as good, but also Ground Zero surprised. Like maybe we're underestimating the other regions besides NA and EU. At least that was the initial sentiment. You know, as the day went on, we actually realized, wow, these other regions are here to play. So that's what I think. Dignitas versus Tokyo Verdy or Verdy, however you say it, is not surprising. However, it was a 3-0. Dignitas played really well, and honestly, there was really no surprises here. This is frankly not really a worthwhile series for me to talk about too much, besides the fact that I'm kind of excited to see the Japanese players have some representation, just because it's really exciting to see the type of style that they bring. Interested to see more of that, but besides that, BDS versus Complexity, now that's where there's some excitement going on here, because right off the bat, Complexity goes extremely aggressive, and BDS kind of lets them. I don't know if it's just two regions facing off looking kind of strange, but I'm used to seeing BDS have Mark by 8 being extremely aggressive, and just on a whole, they're faster than this. Complexity, on the other hand, had other plans. You know, they were extremely aggressive, and they did their own thing. I feel like they dominated the whole map. But even despite this, they took some games, but in the end, they lost, and I think that has to do with maybe BDS was trying to just clamp defense, make sure that Complexity can't score, and eventually they would just out-mechanics themselves and leave open nets. They didn't leave entirely open nets, but there were a lot of opportunities that it's like, all right, well, BDS got it, and yeah, well, they took the W. We'll see how they go in the future. I think the most interesting thing in the NRG versus Era match is just how mediocre NRG looked at LAN. I think that Squishy was really the only one that was pulling his weight, and despite the fact they got the W, for NRG, that's clearly not something we're expecting. We're expecting them to win, especially against a team like Era. I mean, props to the Era guys, but Energy's looking kind of shaky. I don't know. Endpoint versus Renegades was kind of surprising to me. Firstly, because I kind of didn't think Endpoint would be that good going into this, but then I saw, they won 2 regionals. Maybe they're better than I realized. Maybe I've been in NA too long and I don't really know how good the teams are. But Renegades took them out pretty easily. So I don't know what to think about this, to be honest. It surprised me. I think maybe the LAN experienced veterans on Renegades were simply more experienced than the ones on Endpoint. Sandrock versus G2, on the other hand, I felt was really interesting to watch for me, just because I have actually looked into Sandrock and watched their replays a fair bit, and I really like how they play. They're honestly one of my favorite teams in terms of their play style, and it was really exciting to see them beat G2. Now, with G2, I still thought that they would win, but I guess there was just some LAN things that you can't really account for. It did seem like Dries was trying to figure out his comfort level in especially the first game. But besides that, I felt like they weren't that nervous. And Sandrock actually played really well. So their aggression was, extremely aggressive, but it's more controlled than you'd expect to see out of an aggressive team. They weren't leaving that many open nets, and their third man was actually fairly composed. So I guess G2 wasn't ready for that. And despite a few shining moments in Vitality versus FaZe, Vitality looked really mediocre as a team, really subpar. I think a lot of people were expecting, oh, the LAN GOATs, they're going to actually play well at LAN. Maybe that's the case, but I think that we're going to have to wait until later in the tournament to really see those LAN GOATs shine, because they were not fast. They were not good on their passes. They weren't really a presence on the field. They didn't have boost possession. They didn't have ball possession that much. So I don't know. FaZe just completely outclassed them in every way. And I was actually excited to see, is FaZe going to choke under pressure or what? And no, they didn't. They're not their level that they're used to online, but I think that they certainly didn't choke, and I'm excited to see how they do in the rest of the tournament. SMPR versus Furia was interesting because I honestly think it showed just how good all the other regions besides NA and EU have gotten at this point, because this was a really close series. I think that SMPR, on the one hand, had better individual performance, but I think that Furia had better team play. And so it was just kind of a match of the individualistic play style. Well, not totally individualistic, but more individualistic, and the more team-oriented style. I found that very interesting, and I think it could have been anyone's series. And SMPR kind of won there, so props to them. But I think this really could have gone either way. The Brazilians could have taken it. So moving on to round two, the winners round two, there was first Envy versus Dignitas, and oh man, I think Envy is probably not going to get very deep into this tournament. But on the other hand, maybe Dignitas was really so good that they made them look bad, because I personally think Dignitas looked so confident. They looked so good with their contests. Their touches all looked very intentioned, and they were putting the ball exactly where they wanted to. And even in the interview, I felt like apparently Jack just seemed more confident in himself compared to anything we're seeing from the other players, like especially compared to Turbo's interview. I'm really liking Dignitas this tournament, and I'm excited to see how they go. And I'm feeling a little sorry for Envy and NA fans, to be honest, because they're not a LAN team, not right now. I'd like to see them prove me wrong, but they're just not it. Sandrock versus SMPR was, to me, interesting because I felt like Sandrock was doing a lot of what they wanted to. They had some good aggression. They had some composed defense. They were getting some passes together, but they just couldn't score. And I don't think that was their fault. They were putting some pretty good offensive opportunities, but SMPR's defense was really good. I think very consistent. They didn't double commit. They had good coverage of the net, but also in front of the net. There weren't very many threatening shots. And the ones that were threatening, there was always a defender ready. So I think thanks to that, they were able to get away with getting just a few goals every game, using their offense, which, to be honest, I felt like their offense was kind of scrappy. It was oftentimes relying on throwing off Sandrock and getting them to get confused or something like that. It wasn't too much individual crazy solo plays, which, I mean, they tried to have those, but I got the impression that it was really just a matter of throwing off Sandrock. So, I mean, they got away with it, and I still think Sandrock is really good, but clearly SMPR won, so they played better. So during the NRG versus BDS series is really where I'm starting to feel more and more worried for NA fans, just because NRG is not feeling it, especially considering in the first game they lost, and I think it was because of a goal they were expecting a timeout for. Like right before the goal happened, they were asking for a timeout. Something maybe with their headsets or controllers, I don't know. But Justin kind of tweeted out something very angry at the admins, which he promptly deleted. But I think that even as the series went on, and credit to both teams, I felt like not that much happened, just because both of their contests were really solid. I think because of more aggression coming out of BDS, they were able to really create something, and perhaps they just have a better LAN playstyle because they don't rely on mechanics nearly as much as NRG does, who really rely on Justin and Squishy and Garrett, actually all of them, to really pop off mechanically. And in this series, all we saw was Squishy as a standout player for them. You can't just get away with one player doing all the work. That's just not going to work for NRG, not at their level. FaZe versus Renegades, I think, really establishes that, yeah, FaZe is not that bad at No, they're not bad. They're good. They're good on LAN. They're, again, I gotta say it again. They're not as good as they are online, especially first killer, like not able to take control of the ball nearly as well. I find that on LAN teams are throwing away possession more, which is normal. Like that's just a LAN thing. Maybe they can overcome that, but regardless, FaZe was showing that despite the problems of LAN, they're able to win and they're composed and confident, like extremely confident. So Renegades put up a good fight, better than I expected, but FaZe is really good, like really good. I think they're one of the favorites to win this tournament. And speaking of the favorites to win this tournament, I'll give my top 4, not in terms of results, but in terms of just simple eye test of what teams I really liked how they played. I got 4 here. I got Dignitas, who I think they're definitely my favorite team of this tournament so far. They looked so clean with their touches. I felt like anything they did just seemed confident, and that's fun for me. Number 2, I would put as FaZe. Like even though they're not playing as they normally would online, I think they're playing really good regardless. And I think that they're one of the better teams that we've seen so far. One of the other two teams is Sandrock. Personally, I'm just a fan of how they play. I really love their play style. I love how aggressive they get. It looks really fun for me. And I think that if they stay positive, I think that they can maybe make top 8. But I'd be surprised if they won the whole thing. But they're really good in my opinion. And the last top team, I would actually say Complexity. I think Complexity showed that they've got the heart, the Sam heart. They seemed very confident, and they're honestly they looked very similar to how they play online. I think that if they stay on top of their mental, they could, again, similar to Sandrock, get to top 8. I'd be really surprised if they won the whole thing, but they have won some big tournaments, so maybe they've got the ice. I don't know about the LAN ice though, so we'll see. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe, and I'll definitely make some more videos for you guys to watch.